This is
Ascential.
This is Ascential Audio.
Hey y'all, welcome to the MoneyPot, our podcast at Money 2020. I'm Sanjib, Kalita, the editor-in-chief, and today I'm joined by Elena Mesropyan, a content leader for Money 2020 Europe. Good to have you on finally, Elena.
Thank you, Sanjib. I'm thrilled to be on the MoneyPot. This is my very first episode.
So, are you still in London?
Yes, I'm in London. It's been rainy lately, but I'm loving it. And while it isn't the best experience to be stuck at home for what feels like an eternity, it has been really fascinating watching all the fintech innovation coming from so many corners of the world. This is a bizarre but incredibly curious time.
Bizarre but curious is a good way to think about it. We have spoken on previous episodes about the forced transition to remote work and how it is affecting people. We ourselves are feeling the pressure to go hyper-digital, and we see that the businesses that are managing to survive have really had to amp up their digital presence. We even hear stories of people who have transformed their small retail store into an online store in moments.
And the digital presence is only going to be more vital post-COVID. It's unlikely we could ever completely go back to the way things were, but not all digital experiences are smooth yet, especially online checkout. So I spoke to Domm, Holland, co-founder and CEO of Fast, to talk about his ideas to improve the digital checkout process.
Domm is a really impressive guy. They just did a $20 million Series A raise, didn't they? And it had some serious payment contenders like Stripe leading it. So what makes Fast so interesting to a payments platform like Stripe? How did it start?
So it started when Domm's wife's grandmother was helping them out when his son was in the hospital, and their granny was trying to order groceries online and couldn't remember the password.
That's frustrating for anyone. The entire password system is broken.
Exactly. They just thought it was ridiculous that a company hadn't figured out how to make transactions easier. So Domm spent 2 days to build a prototype of a passwordless authentication as a service. It worked like magic links on Slack. When you can send a link to someone, they click the link and it logs them in. And then Domm put his prototype on Product Hunt, and in 48 hours, it was the number 2 most popular item, with tens of thousands of people using it in a couple of days.
So he built it and it was adopted within a week? Wow. And it gets rid of passwords, which, as we all know, are stupid and painful. Initially, passwords made sense, but they're easily hacked. They still exist because they seem cheaper and make people feel safe, but they're both a pain and much less effective than other methods.
And that is the real problem Fast aims to solve, not to improve the password and form filling experience, but eliminate it completely.
Before the company was called Fast, the original prototype was actually called Bypass. And the idea was like buy passwords, right? Is let's just eliminate passwords, because it was, I saw the headache the granny was going through. I thought if we just didn't have passwords, her life would just be easier, right? We don't actually need them. There's other forms of authentication which are easier and more secure. So let's use them instead. I set out to do that, and then I realized the passwords are just the symptom. It's like, that's not what we need to do. We need to solve this whole underlying problem of scaling consumers. And so that's why we sort of broaden what we do is we sit and scale all of these consumer interactions.
Over the course of the conversation, my view on why Fast is interesting has changed. I found the bigger picture more interesting as we spoke.
Looking at the e-commerce vertical, that's where we came from, realized that the problem is so much more than just passwords. Like, passwords are a symptom of the fact that the actual problem is that we as consumers interact with businesses one-to-one, so that every single business repeats this process of like asking us to register, supply information about ourselves, create a security token, which is unique just to that one business, and recreate all of these authentication protocols from scratch over and over again.
So is he just proposing a one-click checkout? That's not exactly a new idea. So if this was an attempt to solve a checkout problem, it's already been done by Amazon, PayPal, Masterpass, just to name a few.
Right. But this is not just about e-commerce. An interesting advantage this company may have has surfaced in our conversation. They're not stuck in their narrative, so to say. There's no context you put the company into when you think about its usage. We cannot say the same about the examples you brought up, because all of them have a very clear context, a payment experience.
As a business, we sort of natively integrate identity and payments into one product, right? And we see them as essentially the same thing, which is like a very different outlook. And so, if your work asked you to now log on to your work CRM using PayPal, that would be like a very weird, unusual experience, right? That wouldn't make sense. Doing that through Fast would be completely normal. Yet also buying a t-shirt on an e-commerce site using Fast Checkout is also a completely normal process. So, and that's because we sit at we scale the whole consumer stack.
So this integrates with any business. How would that be substantially different from Apple Pay?
Well, in some ways it wouldn't be, as long as you use an iPhone forever.
The big problem with phone manufacturers or anything in coming up with their own solutions, such as like Apple Pay, again, you're providing this context, right? So you can have a great experience if you're using this phone, but if next year you buy a new phone, well, all bets are off. Now you got this, now you got to start from scratch again. It's that's not a great experience for consumers. The better experience for consumers is having a sort of device agnostic solution that can work with their device.
That's an interesting differentiation. I can see why that would be an advantage. And it would probably cut the abandonment rates for purchases. Right now, around 80% of online purchases aren't even completed.
Yeah, but don't get too far ahead. Even if we leave out payment companies, let's say their context extends to e-commerce environments. There are other types of companies that aren't tied to an e-commerce context. An odd one could be your browser.
That's a good point, and there is an underlying issue with that type of a competitor as well.
We integrate with the business, and it's important because other solutions which integrate at a consumer level are only ever going to be Band-Aid solutions, because unless you can actually integrate with the business, you can't solve the problem for everyone. So you've got password managers, which they don't solve the problem of passwords. They make it easier to paste a password into a password field, but we still have passwords. Autofill at a Chrome or a browser level or browser extension level, stuff that a consumer could download. They make it easier to paste your data into the form, but the problem isn't getting better forms. What we're doing is eliminating forms. Like you just want to check out, you don't want to fill in a form. And so any real solution needs to be integrated at a business level. And so that's why we go through.
All right. Yes, it needs to be integrated on a business level. But let's change the lens for a moment to the customer experience. Businesses today, especially today, need to be offering all kinds of payment options to capture most of the market. Any way you look at it, Fast is another option. But do we really need another option? I mean, how do you usually pay online?
I always pay only one way, with a card that's stored with my browser. So actually, while the variety is great, it's possible your various customer groups are using one thing all the time.
So it begs the question, is this expansion of choices actually a good or a bad thing for a smooth experience?
Domm had an interesting point on this.
There's two views on this. The first one is that, if you go to a restaurant and they've got a 10-page menu, it makes it harder to order because they've got too many things, right? So on one hand, too many options does provide another layer of friction, right? Even if they're all designed to remove friction. But in saying that, we're not actually at that point. Like, I don't think there's not 10 different payment buttons that you could have. And, Apple Pay is a great example. I think it's a great product. Apple's done a really good job. Half the population in the US have an iPhone. So they've got this huge network of consumers, right, who could use Apple Pay. Potentially, I mean, they still need to be using the Safari browser and their bank has to have a deal with Apple, whatever else. But it's a huge group of people. But from a business perspective, you could not offer just Apple Pay at checkout because you then wouldn't allow 50% of the population in the US to buy from you. Globally, you wouldn't be allowing 73% of the population to buy from you. And even the 17% globally who could potentially use it, they could only use it if they were using your Safari browser as well, not on their desktop, and their bank also had a deal, and most banks actually don't. So it's so contextual that there has to be other options if you're using an Apple Pay. With Fast, we work on every single device, on every single browser, on every platform that a business is hosted on, and for every card. So we actually don't have any of that context. And so, we absolutely see a world where we don't demand it, but we see a world where businesses may start to actually reduce the number of other options that they have because Fast Checkout solves this pain point for every single consumer, which is our primary goal.
So faster payment checkouts without any headache is their goal. Let's do a little thought experiment. Let's say the experience with all payment methods in the nearest future becomes equally smooth, indistinguishable in terms of convenience and speed, and we're not mentioning security. That should be a given. What's next? How can companies stand out then?
Well, premium experiences become the baseline, so companies will have to find a way to deliver even more value to their partners. That translates both into higher tickets and bigger baskets, all while satisfying the needs of the customer. Domm has an interesting prediction on how it could possibly play out.
So there has to be an underlying business value. Otherwise, we become a charity, right? So we just become a consumer charity, which if people paid us a lot of money to do that, then we'd be happy to, but obviously they're not. So there still has to be underlying business value. But unless the primary purpose and the primary function of the product is to drive consumer value, then we're not interested. So we don't build merchant tooling for the sake of building merchant tooling. We only build it if it's necessary to deliver a consumer product. And so, I think a product that you'll definitely see from us in the future, not in the short term, but in the medium to long term, is as we power more of your transactions, obviously we can see that if, for me, I wear a lot of black t-shirts, right? So and I wear a large t-shirt, I wear the same size every time. So it's kind of easy to spot trends in the type of things that I would buy, right? I've got kids, and so you could identify the trends in like the type of toys that I buy kids and my kids and that type of thing. Now, I don't want that like sold to marketers, like that's just given to everyone all around, because that's kind of like the current status of the internet. It's not really amazing. But if I land on a site like ASOS, who's got, which is actually a company that I really like, but they've got hundreds of thousands of products that I just can't possibly get through. Anytime I try and find like a specific product on ASOS, it drives me like wild, because they've just got endless lists of products. And so if there was a fast filter button on that site, right, that when I click that, and only if I click that suddenly the order of all of the products on ASOS were ordered by the ones most likely to interest me, that would be like a very handy feature. When I landed on a page, the product page of a t-shirt, if my size was automatically selected, the color that I'm more likely to buy could be automatically selected. This is just making my life better. And we don't have to tell the store, hey, this person bought 10 black t-shirts before, but we just tell them, hey, maybe show black t-shirts up the top and don't show other things. And so we can do things with data if the consumer wants us to, that will enable like much better consumer experiences. And as a business, again, conversion rate just keeps increasing, right? The more that they can tailor the experience to you, the better. We just don't have to like sell your data or give your data away to actually power that. We just sit in between and add a button that will do that.
So there's a part of me that loves this. It would be so nice to have my preferences applied automatically wherever I am. But it also means that it will be a lot more difficult to resist temptation, and I'd buy even like 6 pairs of shoes, even when I can't go out of the house. That wouldn't be the most responsible financial choice.
That's a solid point. If it's easier and easier to both pay and to choose, does that shorten the time I could think twice about spending the money? So I brought that up with Domm.
It's a good point. It's also like just an important discussion, I think, like typically to have in general in life. When you walk into a store that's got a contactless, like I come from Australia where like 90% of our in-store payments now are done through sort of contactless payment. Now that they've got that, it makes checking out in-store so much easier, right? I don't buy twice as much stuff in store because I've got contactless checkout. It just makes that process really easy for me and more time to leave the store and go back to doing what I was doing, right? We kind of think the same thing about our checkout is, when a consumer is at the point that they want to buy something, let's just make that process easy. We're not selling discovery. We're not building intent. So we're not an advertising platform. We're not trying to encourage you to buy more things. It's from the point at which you've got intent, the point at which you decide that you want to buy something, we then make that really easy. And will that increase the percentage of successful purchases? Probably, because at the moment it's really difficult and there's an 80 to 85% average abandonment rate in e-commerce. Is that incentivizing bad purchasing behavior? I don't think so. Like right now, there's 1 billion people sheltered in place in their house all around the world at the moment trying to buy groceries online. This problem of like hard checkout, friction-full checkout is like probably never been compounded as much as right now. So I think there's a very real reason why we need to increase the conversion rate of business in general.
He has a point. When we assume that faster checkout means people are making bad purchases, we're also assuming that all the abandoned carts are just people changing their minds. That isn't necessarily what's happening. It could be that there are more cases like his wife's grandmother. They simply can't check out or have to start the process over. Faster checkout might simply alleviate frustration and give us better data on what people actually need.
And there is something condescending about assuming people can't rethink something because we made the checkout too simple. So there's one thing left. Because we're talking about payments and faster rails, I had to ask him what he thought about blockchain. Because anyone working on payments and identity has an opinion about where blockchain technology will take us.
Yeah, I'm curious. Blockchain enthusiasts seem just as sure as ever, and they're convinced it is simply early days. But that certainly isn't how all the payments industry sees it.
Actually, I was a bit surprised and, to be honest, loved Domm's bearish perspective on it.
So I think about blockchain obviously a lot, and I'm not like a sort of hard against it, but it doesn't have a huge role in our business right now. I think one, because of the whole sort of ICO debacle, there's blockchain and crypto has a big red mark on their face that that is going to take time to sort of clear. Because of that, like I can tell you, if we had the exact same company, exact same product, and we were built on blockchain, I think it would have been harder for us to get to this point. It'd be harder for us to obtain consumer trust, business trust, and to raise money. And so that's a big problem that needs to be overcome first. Two is that speed. Like we're called fast. Our solution needs to be very fast, very easy for consumers. Blockchain typically adds latency, adds delay. The speed of crypto payments and whatever else is actually quite slow, far slower than traditional sort of networks. So that doesn't play well with our product today. The third point is that with blockchain, like the primary purpose of blockchain is you've got this sort of public immutable record, right? And this has a very real use case in a lot of places in the world, right? Or in different places in the world, I would say. But in reality, like in the US and in a lot of countries, we actually, as much as they might make a lot of money, like in Australia, our banks make a lot of money. We're quite trusting of our banks. They're some of our most trusted institutions that we have, right? I never look at my bank statement and wonder if the bank is actually like hiding records from me. We don't have that issue, right? Society doesn't have that issue in most countries. Like out of everyone that likes blockchain or likes crypto or has pushed it or has thought about it or whatever, I am yet to run across a single person who has ever verified a record on the blockchain. Like no one's ever done that. So the primary use case of being able to verify transactions legitimate, I've never known anyone to have verified a transaction on the blockchain. And so the primary use case doesn't seem that useful to me in most examples, right? So for those reasons, it's not a high priority for me within Fast. I'm not down on it in general. I actually think for our internal ledger, there's really good use cases where a blockchain-esque solution, maybe a faster, sort of more private blockchain-esque solution could be valuable.
Domm's got a point here. Does an average user ever think of downloading a private key and then sit around worrying about their sovereign ID? That does not even remotely sound like a nail in need of a hammer.
I think it might be that he has the wrong use case perspective. There are effective trials that companies like IBM have put in the field that could show how important blockchain will be. But in any case, the usefulness of blockchain is dependent on what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, and Domm has a point that the current state of blockchain has limited usefulness. It could change in the future.
Sure. So that's a wrap for this episode of the MoneyPot. We would like to thank Domm Holland for being our guest.
And we want to thank our producers, Roland, Bodenham, and Rachel Morrissey. And I also want to mention that we cannot wait to see everyone in Amsterdam at Money 2020 Europe on our new dates of September 22nd to 24th. We hope by that time we will be well past the peak of this crisis.
And remember to subscribe to the MoneyPot and leave us a review on iTunes if you like the show. Tweet us at Money 2020 with suggestions for the show too. Thank you.
This is
Ascential.
This is Ascential Audio.